With that, Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Woo! Let's go. Man, it's already after 6. Let's do
It
this.
is. I know. We've been rocking and
Man.
rolling for a while here. We do have some other schedule stuff we're going to get that Stanford thing in here in a second. But ESPN's Greg McElroy says Notre Dame is more desperate than Texas A&M to win their Week 1 matchup. He says, I don't think it's even close. I think by a mile it's Notre Dame. I think you look at Notre Dame this year. This is the year that Marcus Freeman has circled. So do you buy or sell that? Is Notre Dame more desperate than Texas A&M in that Week 1 game?
I don't like the word desperate, but I think Notre Dame
Same.
needs the win more. Like, so I buy the concept of the comment. I do, because if Texas A&M loses, it's expected. They should lose. Notre Dame's in year 3. Texas A&M is in year 1. They should lose. If Texas A&M wins, that surprises everybody. It's fantastic. Like, there's all the positives if they win, but nobody's expecting them to win outside of the state of Texas, right? And so Notre Dame absolutely has to win this game. They should win this game. Top to bottom on this roster, Notre Dame is better than Texas A&M. I'm ecstatic that it's game 1 and not game 11, but Notre Dame should win this game. I 100% agree with Greg McElroy on the concept of his opinion. I just the quote desperate.
The choice of word
thing,
is the
I
bad.
don't like that.
Yeah, I could. Here are some synonyms of desperate: hopeless, anguished, distress, in despair, suicidal, miserable, wretched, desolate, forlorn, disheartened, discouraged. I don't like like desperate.
That's not the right word.
And that's what jumps out in the headline when you see this is the use of the word desperate. Do they need it more? Yeah, like for them, if Notre Dame has eyes on being in the college football playoff, which they do, in which they should, with everything that they've got lined up, just like, like you said, the spirit of what he's saying, I buy. The specific choice of word, desperate, I'm selling that because I don't think they are again, because that leads you to believe that somehow it's like, oh, Notre Dame is like they're struggling by some means and they've got to have this win, and if they don't, it's the end of the world and that kind of thing. It won't be the end of the world. It would not be good for Notre Dame's college football playoffs hopes.
Sure.
But it won't be the end of the world. But I do think they needed a little bit more because of specifically what he's saying. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you got to basically go perfect the rest of the way if you're going to get in.
The margin
because
of error,
because of what we started talking about at the start of this, because of the schedule, how soft it is the rest of the way, that's why you've got to have it. But I think, desperate, there's a connotation there that you're going to be in some sort of frenetically bad frame of mind going into that game.
Yeah, and they don't need to play desperate. They just need to play their game and they'll be fine. Like that.
Right.
And that's the thing about this game. And what worries me, because, you can look at a schedule in the offseason and you can decide who the big games are and all of those different things. My fear is that this is the big game. Like the Texas A&M game ends up, when we're looking back on the schedule, the Texas A&M game ends up being the biggest game of the year. Whether they win, lose, draw, whatever, that the Texas A&M game ends up being the biggest game of the year. Because, USC kind of takes a step back because they're trying to figure out the quarterback position, and there isn't a Louisville from last year, or however you want to parse your way through the schedule. Texas A&M could potentially be the biggest game of the year, and it's game 1. And so the best thing that could happen to Notre Dame is they beat Texas A&M, no doubt, by a couple scores or more, right? And then all of a sudden, Texas A&M, it gets better and better and better as the year goes on. They get a couple of upset victories, and all of a sudden they're riding high at the end of the year. And then Notre Dame can look back and be like, hey, we smoked those guys, and that's a huge, roster boost, schedule boost, strength of schedule boost for Notre Dame. But
right.
I just fear, even if they win this game, that becomes the biggest game of the year. And I don't know that that's.
And then where do you go from there? Can you are you going to have some kind of slip up along the way? And that's kind of what Brent's saying. And, again, I just think that saying desperate means that they're going to be in some sort of grab bagging, mode going in. The whole thing is it's a season opener, new head coach for one side. As Marcus Freeman said recently, confidence is the key. Just play the game.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. You don't have to feel like it's all on the line in this game.
And look, we've talked about this 100 times. It's a big year for Marcus Freeman, and it's an even bigger moment for him going on the road, probably the most hostile environment that you're going to be in all season. How does the team look? Do they look flat like they did last year when they went to Louisville? Or do they come out ready to prove who they are in game one? I mean, that's the biggest question mark going into that game.
Yeah. So Brent says, basically, if it's a given that Notre Dame is 11-1, who do they lose to?
I don't know. It's college football. That's the thing. Like, they could lose to anybody on their schedule. They've proven that.
Honestly, I feel like if they're going to lose one, it's going to be the game that we just talked about, most likely because of the way the rest of the schedule sets up. But you're absolutely right. It is college football. And we've been, the consistency from week to week, game to game is one of the things that we're looking at for Marcus Freeman going into this season. And that's that's the thing that's still got to solve itself this year.
I still have a hard time, believing that Notre Dame lost to Marshall and Stanford a couple of years ago. Like that still doesn't seem real. You could replay that game 1,000 times. Notre Dame wins 999 of them, and they lost the one to both, right? And that's still unfathomable. Nobody would have looked at that schedule and pinpointed those two games that Notre Dame would lose that season. That's why looking at the schedule ahead of time this year, I mean, they could lay an egg anywhere. The ball bounces a weird, funny way. You're playing in a typhoon, whatever the case may be. I know we have to do it because it's our job, but like looking through the schedule, it's hard to find a loss, and I get that. But I also have a hard time thinking that they're going to go 12-0.
Right.
So
I still think they're going to win that game. But the Texas A&M.
I do too.
That we're talking about.
I love the matchups in that game, to be honest with you.
But because it's an opener, and so many things can happen in the opener, and as you said, you're going to look different in that opener than you are a month later, and then obviously by game 12 as well. But just looking at everything on paper right now, I like them quite a bit.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Like I said, I love the matchups, and we'll break that down as we get closer. But there are very few places where Texas A&M is better than Notre Dame going into that game. There's a couple, but Notre Dame has the advantage in a lot of other places.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that according to Pro Football Focus, Notre Dame's Mike Denbrock is the highest paid offensive coordinator in the land at $2.1 million a year.
It's freaking awesome that Notre Dame is paying their coordinators what they're paying their coordinators. It's awesome. That's the blank. It's awesome. I love that, because how long have we talked in the 20 years that we've been doing this together? How many times have we talked about the fact that Notre Dame refuses to pay their assistant coaches, right? It's been forever until they hired Marcus Freeman as the defensive coordinator. That's where the tide finally started to shift. And now they've got the highest paid guy in the land, and that is awesome. It's just one of those negative recruiting things that you can just cross off the list. It doesn't work anymore.
Well, and this was one of the bigger obstacles Notre Dame had to overcome a few years back when you're trying to compete with those elite teams in the SEC. And not just what you're going to pay the head coach, but what can you pay your top assistant coaches? To be competitive, not just with your schedule, but to be competitive nationally, and to be in the mix and mentioned in the same sentence with the Georgias and Alabamas of the world, had to be able to pay your assistant coaches appropriately. And now they are. And the fact that not only is Mike Denbrock the highest paid offensive coordinator in the country, you literally also took him away from one of those SEC schools that's just 5 years removed from a national championship themselves. And not that he was the offensive coordinator then, but you get the picture. Like, it's important for what you're talking about to be appropriately considered, and to be able to get the best people on your coaching staff. You had to be willing to make this kind of investment. So I think it's awesome that to go from where they were and kind of how they viewed that not that long ago, to having two of the best coordinators in the country and also two of the best compensated coordinators in the country, is very important for Notre Dame's success.
Because look, I firmly believe that Mike Denbrock probably could have made more money staying at LSU, but Notre Dame got it close enough to where he made it a decision where I want to be at Notre Dame more than I want to be at LSU, and I'm not taking a massive pay cut to do it. It was at least in the neighborhood of whatever LSU was going to throw at him. Because look, at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that LSU, if there was a bidding war, LSU would have won. Like I believe that's the case, but Notre Dame was close enough that money wasn't the be all end all,
right? But also remember when Notre Dame, when Brian Kelly originally got Marcus Freeman here, who was he negotiating against? He was also negotiating against LSU at that point, and they were able to step up and get Marcus Freeman more compensation here to get him here to begin with as well. So
just LSU. See, we don't need to play LSU. They've already taken all the L's at this point. Got Marcus Freeman. We stole Mike Denbrock. We gave him Brian Kelly. Like, those are all L's for LSU, people. Okay, these are all W's for Notre Dame. We don't need to play them on the field. We're defeating them off the field.
That's right. So fill in the blank. We got the news last week. Of course, we talked about Notre Dame adding Boise State to the home schedule. One opponent that is still up in the air for next year is Stanford, because the contract with the Cardinal expires after this season, and Stanford is now part of the ACC. So we don't know if they're going to be on the 2025 schedule, and it will be blank if the Irish don't play Stanford next year.
A breath of fresh air if they don't play Stanford next year. Like, look, I'm fine with them going into the ACC rotation. They're part of the ACC. That's fine. Put them into the rotation, and you'll play them, 2 times every 5 to 7 years or whatever the case may be. I'm totally fine with that. That's totally cool. We've got that agreement with the ACC. Awesome. There's no need to play Stanford every single year.
I completely agree with that.
It's just not necessary, man. If anything, it hurts your strength of schedule right now.
Yeah, it does now. And I don't think Stanford is ever going to be, I don't want to say ever, but
it's close.
Within the next 15 years even, I don't think that they're going to be what they were in the peak time, the end of Harbaugh and the peak David Shaw years. I just don't think they're going to get back to that again. And so for that reason, I realize why Notre Dame kind of, has the philosophy that they're talking about, like-minded institutions and, academic institutions and all that different kind of stuff. And I mean, Stanford has questions to answer in terms of, do they want to remain a big-time athletic institution, or do they essentially want to be an Ivy League program? I think that's the biggest question they're going to have to answer in the next decade. And it's never done that much for me. The biggest thing that it really seemed to accomplish was you had a partner with USC because of that want to get out to the West Coast every year. But, as we've talked about on this show before, Vince, how much benefit was there really to get to Northern California as opposed to USC in Southern California in that every other year? It just never really seemed like there was that much benefit getting out to Stanford. And so I agree. Like, I will be curious to see if, especially because of sort of because of that factor, if Notre Dame would do a one-off, because next year is supposed to be the year that they go out to Stanford, and like how much of a priority will that continue to be for next year?
Sure.
Even if the ACC is going to kind of make them, be a part of the rotation as opposed to an every year thing. But the other possibility is still, and there are some, I believe it's the Carolina schools are doing this to some extent, or at least some of the Carolina schools. Like, would Notre Dame, would Stanford become part of the ACC rotation versus would Notre Dame essentially sign Stanford, as a non-conference, quote unquote, kind of opponent to keep them on the schedule?
Yeah, that would be a disappointment if that ends up being the
I
case.
agree.
I would be very disappointed because I think there's other teams that you can play that can help you out much more than going to Northern California every other year. Number one, from a location standpoint, and then just from a strength of schedule standpoint. Look, DK says Stanford will improve under their head coach. Okay, awesome. I get it. I could walk around the block and improve my weight by 3 ounces. That doesn't, it's an
They can
improvement,
improve, but how much improvement are they going to do?
That's what
are
I'm
they going to
saying.
be an average team? Are they going to
Right.
be, better than Vanderbilt? Or are they going to be
Right.
Vanderbilt,
And that's the
essentially?
thing. Like, do you really want to tie yourself to that continuously moving
Right.
forward? And the fact that they haven't re-upped that contract at this point, I think hopefully I'm projecting. I'm hoping that means that they're thinking about other options.
So if you're Notre Dame, what should they do with their schedule if Stanford's not going to be on it every year? If they're just going to go into the ACC rotation,
Right.
like, do you still prioritize getting out to the West Coast every year, where where like USC is always going to be there and they're always going to alternate USC? But what about, again, next year they're supposed to go to Stanford Thanksgiving weekend? So what do you do with that part of the schedule? What do you do with Thanksgiving weekend now if Stanford's not on it and you've only got USC every other year out there?
Well, number one, I'm okay with having a different game over Thanksgiving weekend. Okay, so even if it's a home game for Notre Dame,
again, there was never that much appeal for Notre Dame and Stanford for that Thanksgiving weekend. Like Notre Dame USC Thanksgiving weekend,
yes,
that's a game that people want to see that weekend.
Absolutely.
Notre Dame Stanford, it's just like, where do we're going to put it on the Pac-12 network. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay,
exactly.
Thanks, Fubo, or whatever.
I would be okay with some sort of a Big Ten rotation. Get the Purdue's, the Michigan States. And like you said, Oregon's Oregon. If you want to get out to the West Coast, play Oregon. Play Washington. Maybe get kind of a rotation there. I would be okay with that. That still gets you out to the West Coast if that's a priority for you, which I'm not so sure this day and age that it is. Maybe it is. If that's the case, there are other options that can get you out to the West Coast.
UCLA,
Big Ten team.
I still think, again, even though UCLA is not even, traditionally as good, that would, Notre Dame played a home and home those 2 years with UCLA. Again, it's going on 20 years, but like between UCLA and Oregon and Washington, those are 3 teams that I think you could easily swap out and just do them on a rotating basis with some kind of home and home. And you'd get to different parts of the West Coast as well.
Exactly. And it doesn't need to be Thanksgiving weekend either, by the way. It can be anywhere in the schedule that fits. You can, like I said, you can play your last home game of the year on Thanksgiving break here at home. I have no problem with that. You know what I mean?
So they wouldn't always have to be traveling Thanksgiving weekend either. Yeah,
I would think that would be something that Notre Dame or anybody that has anything to do with Notre Dame football would enjoy, maybe being in town for Thanksgiving weekend.
I mean, and this is an interesting one too. Again, Miami is part of the ACC rotation, but if you could work with the ACC to help you out, going to Miami for Thanksgiving weekend wouldn't be a bad trip either. And if you're going to put that in Thanksgiving weekend, again, Miami is Miami. They're supposed to be getting better, but there's still going to be more brand name appeal. Notre Dame playing Miami like Saturday night Thanksgiving weekend than Notre Dame playing Stanford, right?
100%.
I think I think that there are a lot more teams that would make that game much more attractive from a TV standpoint than Stanford would be. And I think as somebody's pointed out, like John B is saying, their field is a minefield, talking about Stanford, and they don't even sell it out. Even in the years where they were really good, they weren't always selling that out when Notre Dame would go out there.
Yep, exactly. And I just don't see the benefits of Stanford. I just don't. And people can say, "Oh, get you out to the West Coast. It's Northern California." No, I don't think that does what you think it does.
Yeah. I mean, DK brings up a good question with Oregon, though. Will they be more reluctant to schedule more Midwest teams for their out of conference?
That's a good question.
That is like them in Washington, because now they're going to have to do all this traveling just to play their conference.
And I'm sure they're trying to feel it out at this point because they don't know what that's going to be like. This is going to be their first year in the Big Ten. They don't know what that is going to entail. And so I would imagine they probably would be fairly reluctant to schedule Midwest teams. But remember, we're not even talking. I mean, it should be a home and home, but that's not even what we're talking about. We're talking about Notre Dame going out there.
Now,
so worst case scenario, it's just a home game. It's a one-off.
Now, this is a good point from Mark. He says, no way the administration will ever want a Thanksgiving weekend home game. And I mean, It is valid. What? Because you're on Thanksgiving break. Everyone goes home for Thanksgiving. Are the students going to be back in time for
games? There's been plenty of games, though, that they've had over fall break when there's no students.
But would you want that? And the weather's not always going to be great.
They've done it. I mean, they've done it. You just sell more tickets to the people in town. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if they think like that. I'll just say that.
I don't know. I'm sure they think about a lot of things, but I don't know what.
I just don't know. I don't know if they think about the right things.
I don't know if that what that specific take would be, just because of the fact that they've never had, they haven't had to deal with it for 20 plus years.
True.
But that's the other thing to remember as well. Like, this agreement only went into place where you started doing this swap. I think it was the end of the 90s. Like the tail end of the 90s was when they started that. So it's like 25 plus years at this point. So they've been doing it for a while, but it's not like they've always done it. This is still a relatively new thing.
Right.
So Boston College, I know I've mentioned this before. Boston College was I believe Thanksgiving weekend. That was the regular season finale that year, 1993. The week after Florida State. Those were both home games.
Plenty of people in the stands for that one, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Just throwing it out there.
That's right. So, Vince, kind of a bombshell this afternoon. According to D1Baseball.com, former Notre Dame and LSU baseball coach Paul Mainieri is expected to be named the new head coach at South Carolina. What do you think about this development?
Huge opportunity missed for Notre Dame. That's what I'll say. Huge opportunity missed. I think, and I'm joking slightly, but not really, because I don't think that Sean Stifler necessarily should be let go. He's only been here for 2 years. It's just not trending in the right direction, in my opinion. He's firing some of his staff. There's issues there, right? And so if I'm the athletic director at Notre Dame, which I'm clearly not, and I hear that Paul Mainieri is sniffing around other jobs, I'm picking up the telephone and I'm asking him, what are the chances we can get you back up to Notre Dame? If he's willing to go to the SEC and coach baseball, that means he's still got it in his blood, and he still wants it, and he still wants it at a high level. I think this is an opportunity missed for Notre Dame. I'll just say it.
I do as well. With how things were, that would be the way things went this year. And I realize the guy that you've got is under contract, but as I've said, next year is make or break for Sean Stifler at Notre Dame. And he seems like a really good guy and all that, in terms of the results. I think it's TBD at this point.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Paul Mainieri is a guy who left Notre Dame, loving Notre Dame. There were a myriad of reasons that he left Notre Dame. It worked out well for him. He won a national championship at LSU, went to the College World Series several times. He was runner-up in 2017 at LSU. And I mean, the reason he retired to begin with is he had some neck, like some cervical issues, and he was having some really bad migraine headaches and just, a lot of, quality of life things relatively soon after the surgery were not where he wanted them to be. So he got out of coaching. And, I think after being away for a little bit, he obviously missed it, but at the same time, his body healed up as well, and I think that he is in a different place physically right now. He's 66, so it's not like he's over the hill in terms of coaching. He only, coached a couple of years ago. He was in the mix at Miami last year. He interviewed down there last year. And I remember we talked about it here and we're like, please don't go to Miami. Please don't go to Miami. So now he could end up at South Carolina. And I don't know. Obviously, wish him well. And it's funny because we started the show talking about this is the 1-year anniversary of the show. He was actually the first guest that we had on the show as well. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
But we had him on for that show 2 years ago. And, we talked about Link Jarrett and all the success he had and, a lot of different things in that interview. So obviously wish Paul well, but, I really, and I said it to him that day, I think that you can win at Notre Dame, but it has to be the right person. And Paul Mainieri showed that he was the right person. If you go way back when Pat Murphy showed that he was the right person. Pat never got, Notre Dame to the College World Series. Mainieri did. Link Jarrett got Notre Dame to the College World Series. Like, it has to be the right person. And we found out relatively quickly that Link Jarrett was the right person. And unfortunately, again, you expected there to be some drop-off after you had a guy like Link Jarrett, but you don't expect to tie the program record for fewest wins in ACC play in a single season just 2 years after you were in the College World Series. So, but I'm still just, I'm shocked, but not shocked that Mainieri is going to end up at South Carolina because he's going to go he's going to go to an SEC power, it sounds like. And like I mentioned earlier, South Carolina's athletic director, Ray Tanner, is the guy who was the head baseball coach when they won back-to-back national championships a few years back. So the guy knows baseball. And if he's going after Paul Mainieri, he obviously knows that he's going to get himself a really good baseball coach.
Oh my gosh, yes. You've got his number. Tell him he hasn't signed anything yet.
That's right.
Tell him, Notre Dame, call him up. Let's do it.
DK wants to know why baseball managers stood up like they're going to get into the game. I mean, he said, can you imagine football coaches suited up?
I mean, look, baseball coaches aren't wearing equipment. So, I mean, there is a bit of a difference there. It's not like, lacrosse coaches wear the helmet and all of that stuff. Baseball coaches, all they wear is the pants. Let's be honest. Like, they could wear the jersey, but most of the time they're wearing a sweatshirt or they're wearing a pullover or, something along those lines. They wear the pants. It's just how it's always been done. And I realize that's not a good reason. But when I was a head baseball coach, man, I would get ribbing from people, and I would tell my buddy who was the swim coach, just be lucky it's not like that in your sport, buddy.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Decaf says Notre Dame needs major upgrades at the EC. I mean, they've done some pretty good upgrades just in terms of the team stuff, the team rooms and the clubhouse and all those different things. They've done really good things in there. The fan experience at the EC. I mean, one of the issues is if you build it, are they even going to come? Just because of where you are. And if you don't have a product you can put on the field, what difference does it make what the facility looks like? And unfortunately, you're back to what's the product going to be? That's where you are right now with Notre Dame baseball in 2 short years. And in the meantime, Link Jarrett's going back to the College World Series. And South Carolina is going to be back in the World Series again pretty soon. If they're hiring Paul Mainieri, I have no doubt about that. So,
no doubt.
Caitlin Clark left off the U.S. women's Olympic basketball team over the weekend. Vince, which do you have the bigger issue with? Clark's snub or the avalanche of takes that came after it this weekend?
I haven't heard many of the takes. I will
say
that.
Well, you stayed off Twitter then, obviously, because Twitter was flooded with Caitlin Clark takes. Some of them good, some of them bad, all weekend long.
Whether she deserves to be on the team or doesn't deserve to be on the team, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and like a lot of people talking about a missed opportunity from a marketing standpoint. NBC has to be mad because they're not going to have Caitlin Clark, all that kind of stuff. I guess if you haven't seen it, look.
Yeah, help me out here.
There are only 12 players who get to go.
Correct.
Right? So like 12 is a very select amount. And I realize that Caitlin Clark was the best college player in the nation. But there are a lot of, very deserving professional players who are going to be over there. Like Arike Agumbawale, she is one of the, like, she and Clark both went to this. They only took 14 players to the tryout, I guess.
Okay.
Agumbawale and Clark are the two who didn't make it. You know, like, you can definitely say, well, why does Diana Taurasi at 40 years old or whatever she is at this point, why is she still on the team? Because Clark actually has better numbers than Diana Taurasi right now.
Well, and Clark's not having a great rookie year, by the way. So, like, I could get on board with the fact that she didn't make the team based on maybe how she's playing or, you know, something along those lines. Because, you know, look, basketball is a streaky kind of a game, right? And if you're not playing well, who's to say you're going to continue not playing well, you know, when you get over to the Olympics and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't really have an issue with the snub. I mean, that's just the coach's decision or whatever. You should not make the team just based on who you are in a off the court scenario. Now, your point about Diana Taurasi, though, I would take Caitlin Clark over Diana Taurasi. Diana Taurasi's, she's over the hill. Like, it's time to pass the torch.
Right. I mean, if you're saying that, you know, like, people who are making the argument, well, are you only taking Caitlin Clark for the name? At this point, you're really only taking Diana Taurasi for the name and the reputation.
That is correct.
That she has.
Now, I think if I'm sitting there as a coach, and let's say Caitlin Clark is like my 10th, 11th, 12th best player, right? Do I take her on the team and let her ride the pine the entire time and deal with the thousands of questions that are going to come as to why she's not playing?
Well, and that was, I think, one of the justifications for not taking her.
Okay.
And I do think that because of the lightning rod that Caitlin Clark is right now, like, in, you know, if you're the coach of that team and then you've got to deal with, you know, like, the decision on how much Caitlin Clark is going to play versus is she going to sit, like, I honestly think it would just be a bigger distraction right now.
That was exactly my point. 100%. Like, is that something as a coach?
You've already got all this petty jealousy across, you know, the league, whether these players want to admit it or not. There's already that. Why just compound it just to say you're taking Caitlin Clark? Make her earn it 4 years from now. Like, she'll be a different player 4 years from now.
100%. And these over the hill players will be hopefully gone by then as well. And then she'll be one of the elite players, I'm guessing, on that team 4 years from now, right? I mean, but if she's just going to sit the bench, I would rather just not have her on the team, to be honest with you, because I don't want to deal with all that. Like, they're dealing with it now, but they'll deal with it for a new cycle, and then they can move on and try to go win gold and not have to worry about those a million questions. I get it. I get it.
There's obviously a case for her being deserving, but at the same time, I just feel, you know, again, like to answer my own question, you know, the avalanche of takes, it's just, you know, it's like, you don't have to have a take on everything, you know, and you knew, like, because even if she had made the team, there was going to be an avalanche of takes about, oh, you're only taking her because NBC
absolutely,
and you want ratings and everything else. And, you know, it's like, but there is something to the fact as well, you know, like, if you want to keep playing, you know, like, both sides of the argument, there is something to the fact that not only have the women, like, won all these gold medals at the Olympics in women's basketball, they haven't even lost a game in the Olympics in 30 years, you know, so you could literally probably take players, you know, what would that be, like 25 through 36 or what, you know, like,
you probably go win it still.
Yeah. And still go win. So, you know, like, how much it really matters in terms of, are you taking the best of the best? But again, I just feel like one way or another, if Caitlin Clark isn't out there probably getting at least 12 minutes a game, that would become its own thing. And how much do you really need to deal with that once the Olympics start? So,
agreed.
So game 2 of the NBA Finals included 600 lobsters in the media dinner at Boston's TD Garden Arena last night. One, we've never gotten lobster that I can recall at a media pregame.
No.
What's the best media meal you've ever had?
This is easy. You know exactly where I'm going with this.
I think I do.
Nelson's Chicken. 100%.
Nelson's Chicken pregame.
Yes.
Bruno's Pizza halftime.
Yes.
You don't have to give me, like, I would take the lobster, but you don't have to give me lobster.
Oh.
Those were the golden days.
Those were the golden days, man. And remember the strategy that we would come up with to make sure we got Bruno's at halftime? Like, we were scoping out another floor and like waiting for it to come in and then just hitting it hard. And then because none of the media knew where this other place was that they would drop the Brunos and like, oh, those were the good old days, man. And I would play like tricks with myself and not eat any of the chicken until Notre Dame scored a touchdown. And there were games where that was a real problem back in the day. And oh, it's so good. You just walk up and there's a guy with a giant glove and he's just like, here, have a half a chicken. Like it was, I mean, those were the days, man.
Oh, man. No kidding.
It has taken a severe turn for the worse.
You're making me hungry just thinking about it.
I know, right? You can smell it. You can taste it.
I know.
Oh, it's so good. So good.
So awesome. So awesome.
So good.
So going back to the scheduling thing, see if you can work out alternating USC and UCLA. And, you know, like I said, I think UCLA is a substitute for Stanford. I think that's
I would take that in a heartbeat.
Been a more deniable or a more desirable game. Yeah.
I'll take that in a heartbeat. 100%. I would take that in a heartbeat. And at least, even if UCLA is up and down from a competitive standpoint, at least the Southern California market is one that you would want to be in.
Yep. Exactly.
From a recruiting standpoint, yeah.
DJ was asking about women's basketball play-by-play. That is the plan in terms of me for next year. So looking forward to another year of that. And we had Olivia Miles on the show a few weeks ago. Remember, you can always dial that up. You know, go back in the podcast feed or on YouTube. Stay tuned tomorrow. Another big guest lined up. You know, I don't like to say the names.
I know. I think I saw the name. Did I see the name in a prepared room?
You probably did.
When I was getting in? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
For once, I know the name.
So we got a big one lined up for tomorrow. Ryan Roberts will
do.
be here. We'll talk a little recruiting as well, but interview planned to go for tomorrow. As long as everything goes to plan, to schedule.
That's right. I'll be out of town, so I can't bail you out.
That's right. Ryan will be here. Jesse will be here for rapid fire
as
well. Vince, enjoyed it as always.
Yeah,
Thanks again for the last, going on 20 years, but the last 2 years specifically.
Right. 2 years and hour and 40 minutes. Like we were rolling today.
Man, no kidding. We did.
It's good stuff.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Of course, appreciate you jumping in for the 2-year anniversary of the show. Hit the like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.